My name is Elysia and thanks for tuning into my channel. I'm super excited to be filming my first YouTube video in my newly renovated studio. During this video, I'm going to show you how you can transform an old piece of vintage furniture into the perfect addition for your home. I was able to pick up this gorgeous piece of furniture for only $20. A lady on our street was actually throwing it to the side of the road with a free sign on it, so I decided to give her the $20 I had in my pocket, knowing that this would be a great project to refinish as part of my business or even as for a new addition for our home. The first thing I'd like to do is remove all of the hardware. This piece is actually missing one of the knobs, but it's okay because the two really crucial pieces are actually here. They're just put on the wrong spot. So I'm going to remove all the hardware because I'm going to do something with it later in the video, and then we're going to give this piece a really good clean. I absolutely love the old vintage hardware that came with this piece, and I want to make sure that I don't lose any of the hardware that fits perfectly with it, so I'm going to put it into a jar and keep it safe until I need it later on in my project. Since the door hardware is exposed on the outside of the piece of furniture, when I paint this, I don't want to get paint on this original hardware. So I'm going to actually remove the doors so I can take off the hardware. Having no paint on the hardware that's exposed gives your finished product a more professional look when you take a few extra seconds to just remove the hardware. I'm going to put all of my hardware into another jar. Once you've removed your doors, you want to make sure that you actually line them up in the same spot that they are. That way when you go to put them back on, they're going to work and function just as well as they did when you took them off and you didn't get them shuffled. I'm just using a couple pieces of scrap wood on the ground here to keep these raised up to make painting them a little bit easier on our next step. You want to do the same technique for organizing the drawers. If this was a 6 or 9 drawer dresser, you don't want to get them all shuffled up. You want them to be able to slide and glide just the way they did originally in the dresser. Over the years on a vintage dresser, different cleaning products and even wood protectors will have been used. You want to make sure that you use a good cleaning agent to make sure that all the grease and debris is off of your piece before you start painting. I'm using a little bit of warm water and some TSP. As you can see, there's a lot of debris on this, and so it was really good that we took a couple extra seconds just to make sure it was nice and clean. Many paint brands will tell you that there's no prep required when using their products. I have to tell you that my #1 tip for refinishing furniture is to do the prep work. Prep is the key to having perfectly refinished furniture that will last you a really long time. One of the most loved products in my shop is actually my DeWalt orbital sander, and I'm going to use some 180 grit sandpaper, and I'm going to go over all the surfaces that I can use with my orbital sander to make sure that this gets a really good scuff sand before we apply any paint. While I'm using my sander, you'll notice that I'm always traveling along the grain of my wood surfaces. Now that my surfaces are all sanded, I'm going to use just a slightly damp cloth and clean off all of my sand and dust. Since this is a really well-loved dresser, I've noticed that there's a couple indents on the top of the surface that I really want to make sure are level with the top of the dresser. Looks like maybe there was some candle wax or something, or maybe a couple key scratches. So I'm going to use a little bit of wood filler on my surface and just make sure that it's nice and smooth and let it dry. Now that my putty's all dry, I'm going to sand over and make sure that these surfaces are nice and smooth. I'm going to be using a really nice deep hunter green for this project. Now the most fun part of the project is getting to apply your color. You're finally at the step where you get to transform your piece. I'm just using a dollar store brush for this project. I actually don't use any fancy paint brushes while working on my project. This works perfectly fine, and I'm going to make sure that I paint along the grain. You're not going to get full coverage on your first application of paint. You actually don't want to apply thick coats your first coat. A few thinner coats works a lot better in this case, and it actually adds to the long-term durability of your piece. When you get to edges, the best thing to do is to pull the paint away from where your edge is. If I was to pull this way, all I'm doing is leaving, a great big clump of paint on this side when I pull that way. That could harden and you won't get an even surface at the end. So what I do is I always pull towards any edges that I have. You want to make sure that you don't miss any of these under sections here either. I've used some little pieces of scrap wood just to have a little bit of a base so that I don't get paint all over my flooring. I'm going to keep the inside pieces of this cabinet original, and so what I'm going to use is some painter's tape. I'm going to tape off where I'm actually going to stop with my painting. That keeps a nice clean look when you open the doors of the cabinet. When painting drawers, you want to go along the grain and make sure that you get these little side panels, because when your drawers slide in and out, you want to make sure that this looks nice and clean. You'll notice on some of my pieces that I have these really nice detailed beveled edges, and so what I'm going to do is use a smaller paintbrush, just make sure that I get my paint really nicely into those spots. When working on the detailed drawers, I'm going to fill all of my little tiny sections first with my small brush and then use my large brush to make sure that I don't have any drips. You actually don't want to be filling these holes with paint because then it'll look all clumpy inside. You're just making sure you get enough paint in there to fill and cover the wood. I'm going to refinish the hardware that's on this dresser. The original hardware is actually gorgeous. I'm just missing a couple of knobs, so I picked up a few spares at my secondhand store for about 50 cents. When you're going to replace your hardware on vintage furniture, the expense becomes quite high, and if you're going to try to do this as economically as possible, reusing the hardware is a great way to save some money. So I've just done a really light coat. I'm gonna let this dry and then I'm gonna do another couple of coats until I'm completely covered. And of course, I'm gonna need to flip the handles on this type of hardware and kind of turn things around and flip things over. I'm also doing the screws so that the heads of the screws, when they're back on, are not actually the original color with the black hardware. I want everything to be cohesive. I've waited a couple of hours for my hardware and my furniture to actually fully dry. And now what I'm gonna do is I wanna put a protecting coat on this piece of furniture. I like to use a Minwax finishing paste. It's just a natural color. It looks just sort of like yellow or orange colored cream. And I'm going to use some blue shop rags, which are actually lint free, to rub it on. I apply this by putting a little bit of the wax onto my rag, and then I work in circles along the surface of the entire piece. Now that I've waxed my whole piece, I'm going to return the hardware where it belongs. Before I put on the center doors, I'm just going to remove the painter's tape, and as you can see, it gave it a nice, clean, professional look when the doors will be open. Just replacing all of the hinges so that I can hang the doors back up. Video inspired you to create some of your own refinished furniture. I really appreciate all the support that I've been getting on my channel. You can help support my channel by hitting the like button and subscribing to my channel. Don't forget to share this video with someone you think will enjoy it. If you have any comments or questions and things you would like me to do in a future video, please leave them in the comment section down below. Once you've removed... Oopsie.
Good.